What's up guys, welcome back to Elderwood Games. Thomas here, and today I'm going to talk about my goals for April. One thing I wanted to do is start working again on my tabletop RPG. My plan is to release it at some point this year, probably in the form of a zine or some other kind of printable document, just because I don't really want to have to go through the rigmarole of getting publishers and books and all that stuff. And with a smaller size like a zine, I should be able to accomplish a lot of the artwork myself and work toward that. I believe I've mentioned before that this is actually something that I've really wanted to do for a really long time, and it's actually a project that I've been working on since I was in college, which is about a decade ago, which is crazy to think about. So it's just something that I really am feeling excited to do and really wanting to actually make happen this year. So the month of April, mainly my goal is that a lot of the time I would typically be spending on Warhammer 40,000 or other kind of stuff within the hobby. I'll be working on that game. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the teasers of how the game system I'm planning on releasing will work. So firstly, the game currently working title is Roamers. In this game, it is a game pretty much based around the idea of being a party or a single player known as a roamer, and these characters are able to withstand or venture out into sort of a weird, wild kind of world, and with the basic purpose of being able to connect civilizations or help expand growth in pretty wild settings. So the game is meant to be pretty chaotic in some ways, but also have a little bit of a sort of classic dungeoneering feel. So I am getting a little bit of inspiration from sort of the old school Renaissance and sort of these older game mechanics, and also being not super deadly like those may have been, but also not fearing that as part of an interesting kind of avenue to go down. So the game can be quite deadly, and I'll have some modifiers baked in to allow for sort of some play there where you can have, you know, an easier game, something that's more akin to the likes of Dungeons and Dragons, something more in the middle like Pathfinder, or something that's much more deadly, something like Morkborg and those sorts of things. So kind of on that sliding scale, I'll have some kind of key takeaways that you can sort of use in order to build your game around sort of the desired amount of effect. The basic mechanic of Roamers is a D20 based system, like a mini games of its kind, but in this case I wanted to do a roll under system. The main reason is that I like the simplicity of it. So basically anything that you try and do, you're trying to roll a D20 underneath your ability score modifiers. So you'll basically be able to roll into attributes, and then those attributes you can level up over the course of the game, and then you're just going to get better at those and better at those, and that's ultimately how the game works. Since I really like rolling multiple dice, and I like how advantage and disadvantage works in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, I decided to take that idea and run with it in a slightly different way. So in this game, you'll actually be able to select skills which will be self-created. So the game won't actually have baked in skills for you to kind of elect, but instead you'll actually be able to choose your character's own journey and exactly what skills you feel that they would be able to use. Now, granted, there are some limitations baked in. You can't just say sword, and anytime you pick up a bladed weapon, you have a skill with it. It needs to be a little bit more specific than that, but it doesn't have to be as specific as rapier or katana and that sort of thing. It can be, you know, one-handed sword, two-handed sword, that sort of thing. With magic, in a similar way, you're able to select skills for your spells or be able to spellcraft within some subsets of sort of the schools of magic. You wouldn't be able to select something like abjuration or evocation to have that wide of a breadth, but to be more akin to Avatar: The Last Airbender, you can select an element to be your magic skill, and then you can, you know, make a fireball or a firebolt, or, you know, create fire, put fire out. Those sorts of things will be within the bounds of what your spells can do, but spells are limited in that whenever you fail to meet those rolls, you lose that spell for the remainder of the day until you're able to rest again. And there are some interesting sort of pseudo class options when you select to have magic as a character that will determine what attribute score you're going to be using for your spellcasting, but also gives you an ability to negate the kind of loss of spell and that sort of thing. But more on that in the actual book. One of the other kind of aspects of this game that is more meaningful to me, I guess, is that I really am building it in a way that I kind of run games. And a lot of times, some of you may have been dungeon masters before, game masters before for various games. And you know that there's a lot of thinking on your feet and players keeping you on your toes and that sort of thing. You got to be ready to run into and that sort of thing. So I really want streamlined rules, but also the ability to create things on the fly very easily. So I will have a selection of kind of random roll tables and that sort of thing to be able to be used in the instance that you need to make up something very quickly. And this will also help because I do plan on making this game able to be played on your own or with a group. So having the random tables in there already baked in will allow players to play on their own and be able to adventure in a world that is as surprising to them as it would be if they were a player in another person's game. So yeah, for April, I really want to try and get most of the words put out. But what I mean by that is really like iron out kind of how I want things to be phrased and that sort of thing. A lot of the mechanics and a lot of the kind of minutia of how the game works is done. It's just filling out tables, filling out sort of the more or less the narrator, the guide, the game master kind of portion where it's finalizing those things and then really working out how things need to be said and written in all the other portions. So my hope is by the end of April to have a working kind of script, I guess you could say, of the book. If not, also be starting to plug in and format the book itself. I really hope that it stays underneath about 20 pages. I don't want this to be too long, just because I want it to be quick. You can pick it up, you can read it in, an hour. Players can get what they need to know within that time. Or if you're just teaching someone to play, it can be very easily just, hey, this is how you do this is how you do that. Pick your skills, we're off to the races. In my play tests that I've already done with it, I was able to pick up new players and they were able to understand the kind of loop of the game very quickly and learn that there's a lot more creativity in this form of game where you have more control over how you do things and you understand that you already understand what you need to roll in order to accomplish things. So you already have a little bit of an understanding of how much you can do instead of it being me just, as the game master saying you need to roll X number whenever you ask to do something. It is, okay, my strength is 12, so I just need to roll under 12 to lift this thing. Now there are some modifiers in the system called boons and banes, which will add dice to your pool, but also take the dice away that you may need. So boons, basically good things, helpful things, will add a die, and then you take the highest number, which you're not going to use anyway, but it basically just adds a dice to your pool and allows it to be, just gives you a little bit of a better chance to do the thing. Whereas a bane is a negative thing. So if you're trying to pick up a boulder, maybe it's slippery, maybe it's recently rained, so it's a little bit stuck in the mud, but you roll an additional die, so you still get the extra kind of statistical advantage of rolling an extra die. However, you also remove the lowest number. So that means that it's possible that you remove the success that you would have. And it creates an interesting kind of gameplay where, you kind of understand like, okay, well, you are able to kind of interpret the world around you in a unique way and be able to understand that, okay, well, the game master has told me that it has recently rained and we're trying to do something that requires the ability to grip things. So it's likely that we're going to have a hard time. And it allows the players to have a little bit more agency over how they are kind of doing things and being able to move around the world around them. I like that idea of kind of putting it in the players' hands a bit, of allowing them to kind of understand that they have some say in how things work. And And that's how I run my games, and that's a lot of what I'm putting into Roamers, is sort of the resources that I wish I had in gaming systems, but also making a gaming system that encourages freedom and encourages player creativity, so that way they feel like they have some hold on the reins as well, and it can be more of a joint experience of building the world around each other and kind of having it all be, a joint effort and more fun for everybody. So definitely look forward to that. Like I said, I really hope that I can put this fully out by the end of the year, but I am going to be focusing a bit more on the tabletop RPG kind of stuff this month, and I may release at least one more video talking about design philosophy, stuff like that, but ultimately I'll probably still talk a lot about Warhammer 40,000 in the coming weeks, just because we're getting a lot of really cool stuff about 11th edition and also the end of 10th sort of releases and that sort of thing that I'll definitely be keeping you guys up to date on as well. But thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. I know this isn't my usual video, but my hope is in the future that this will be something that's maybe a bit more common as I sort of delve into other aspects of the tabletop gaming hobby, including RPGs and other war games, and potentially working on additional content that I create myself to, maybe one day be able to do something like that more as a full-time gig. So thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you all in the next one.